Welcome to Lip Service for Contractors. Here you'll learn what moves the needle in your business. With your hosts, Brigham, the deep thinker, Josh, the $100 million contractor, Zach, the confused millennial, Laura, the foreigner. Lip service. It's not about dictatorship. It's about leadership. It's not about duplication. It's about innovation. It's not about stuff. It's about your people. Strap in and get ready for some lip service.
And we are back with Lip Service for Contractors, you guys. We have a fantastic show for you today. We're going to be talking about your dispatcher. Now, in the back of your head, you're going, okay, cool, dispatcher. What's so great about them? Well, everything. They have internal customers. They have external customers. What do I mean by that? Well, they've got people they've got to please inside the organization, like technicians and CSRs and the owner. And they have people outside the organization that they've got to please on a regular basis, which is your customer, the homeowner. Their role is vital. They've got to play their game extremely well. And today we're going to cover all of that and much, much more, all of which happens in 60 seconds.
Chances are you love what you're hearing on Lip Service for Contractors. And if you want to go deeper, have an actionable playbook, or just want to learn from some of the most successful and profitable contractors in the industry, check out Clover Marketing from Josh and Laura. They give away free, amazing information, tools, SOPs, scripts, and processes that help their family business grow to over 140 million. And those same tools have helped other contractors in the industry blow up their business and grow an average of 20% every single year. Check out growwithclover.com/free gifts. They update the free gifts section all the time, so make sure you keep coming back.
Power Selling Pros is the customer service coaching company for contractors. Their one-on-one coaching for CSRs helps contractors book at least 85% of their calls and wow more customers. And their group training for technicians helps you create a better buying experience in the home and close more sales. Visit powersellingpros.com to learn more about how you can make more money with their coaching programs.
All right, and we're back. So what is it about a dispatcher? You guys, you want to chime in, or should we just jump into what is it that they need to do?
I think it should really start with defining what a dispatcher's role is, because I mean, I've traveled a ton of business. I know you have too. Between the two of us, it's in the hundreds. And a lot of dispatchers, if you were to ask them what their job is, it's entirely defined differently than how I define it. So let's start with that. I'm just curious, Brigham. We never talked about this before. What's a dispatcher's job?
Okay, so I feel the dispatcher's job is threefold. Number one, they've got to keep the box full. What I mean by that is they've got to be very, very good at Tetris, right? You see the boxes come down in Tetris and you've got to be able to fit them in. That's what a dispatcher does. They got to stuff that box with as many appointments as possible. Keep the technicians as busy as they can possibly stand and get to as many customers as they possibly can. That's number one. I find that sometimes dispatchers, when they get overwhelmed, they go to the CSR room and they do a little bit of, hey, we got to cool it. You know, we got to tell people that there's no way we can come out today. Problem, the minute you tell a CSR that they don't have to book calls, what happens is you get less booked calls. There's a problem with that. You never want to go into a CSR room and say, hey, simmer down on that. Simmer down on booking calls, because that's the reason for their existence is to book calls while the customer. So do not tell your CSR department under zero circumstances to stop booking calls. Tell them to book calls. Your job to play Tetris like nobody's business and make it all work. Now, the third key to that is being good to your technicians. Okay, technicians tend to work hard for a great dispatcher. And sometimes, either consciously or subconsciously, they don't work as hard or they don't try as hard just to spite them. And you know it happens all the time. The dispatcher has to be liked by the technicians. Now, that doesn't mean you cave to them. It means that you develop a respectful relationship with them. Now, I realize that this is a difficult thing to do, but If a dispatcher has the ability to reason with technicians, reason with them. In other words, let's say that a technician had a fishing trip planned, which happens all the time, right? They've got personal plans that happen. And the dispatcher knows that they've got this fishing plan that they have planned, but all of a sudden there's a family that needs their expertise today, like right now, or we lose the business. So what do? You've got to have the ability to talk to that technician, reason with them, promise that, hey, towards the end of the week, I'm going to make this up to you. I'll give you 2 days of fishing and not just one. I promise I'm going to make this up to you. But being able to genuinely care about them as individuals, that they have families, that they want their own time. If they can do that, my gosh, they can move heaven and earth. They will be able to change lives. They'll be able to stuff boxes like never before. That's what a dispatcher needs to be. Those 3 things: never say no, be good at Tetris, and be great at reasoning with the technician to get as many out there as possible and keep them emotionally engaged in their job.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I'm not normally the facilitator on this podcast, right? But I think those are almost 3 separate topics, and I'd love to deep dive into all 3 of those. But let's start with the first one, which is the description of a dispatcher. You talked about, playing Tetris, filling the box. And that's exactly what most dispatchers think their job is. But I would make the argument that is not at all their job. Their job is one thing and one thing only: to maximize revenue. That's their job, period. What does that mean? That means if I have a call right down the street from another call, it's my responsibility as a dispatcher to call that customer, sometimes make them upset, always make it right, but move that call so I could run right down the street, because if I eliminate drive time, I maximize revenue, right? It's also about giving the ball to the best players, right? Giving your QB the ball. When I have an older system I know is 10 plus years old, I know they're having issues, I know it's broken down, picking and choosing the right contractor, always keeping drive time in mind. If you live in a big service area, it can't be a 4-hour drive. That's not the right person then, right? But a dispatcher's job above all else is maximizing revenue, which a lot of times what happens is dispatchers, just like you said, they want to cut off calls. We'll cover that in a second, but they try to keep things organized and the same. And that's not the point of a dispatcher's job. A dispatcher's job is meant to call, to reschedule, to reorganize consistently all the time with one thought in mind, and that's only maximizing revenue. So I think that's a huge difference between my mindset and what most dispatchers think they're supposed to do, right? Dispatchers think, for the most part, they're like, hey, I've got all these calls on the board. I got to figure out how to run these calls. That's my job. And that's not your job. Sometimes it's your job not to run all those calls, because instead you'd rather maximize revenue, move people till tomorrow instead of running that call today, because it means more revenue, because I've given the right people the ball and because I've eliminated drive time. Does that make sense?
So question there. So again, it's all about filling the tech schedule and maximizing revenue. And this brings up a common question that I hear from so many contractors: how many jobs should each one of my technicians get every single day? Because if one of the keys is never say no, another key is fill the schedule. So some contractors, like, my techs only need to do 3 calls a day. We often suggest 4. Some contractors suggest 5. So again, what's that happy medium? Because I think that's an important point in facilitating a dispatcher's success.
If you're trying to maximize revenue, which is the job of a dispatcher, right? Then I want to be between 4 and 5 calls. I actually like 5 calls personally. A lot of people do 4. I've seen some companies do 3. You maximize each individual call, but you do not maximize revenue, because you don't put margins in the bank. You put money in the bank. So 4 to 5 is what I would suggest for an AC tech specifically. Plumber, it's more 3.5, because plumbers get stuck on larger jobs. Obviously, for installers or a comfort consultant, this is a different story. But a comfort consultant, I want 5 calls too. 4 to 5 calls, kind of the same situation. And obviously, the thought process there is, if they take their time, they spend more time, they're more thorough, they create a better experience, you are in fact maximizing revenue. Running 7, 8, 9, 10 calls in a day, you cannot be thorough. You are walking right over money. You're walking past the quarter to pick up a nickel.
All right.
Well,
So confused millennial chiming in here for a second. What causes a dispatcher? What makes it difficult for a dispatcher to maximize revenue? What makes
Mainly it's thought process. It's thought process, right? They are trying to play that Tetris, as Brigham said, right? And they're not even thinking about drive time sometimes. Or worse, they're not thinking about getting the biggest opportunity calls to your best players. You got to do that within reason, but you can't let the opportunities go to your maintenance tech, right? It's common sense. People do it all the time though, right? It's not being willing to call that customer because they're going to be pissed off and push them to tomorrow, because that's what maximizes revenue. So the biggest problem is mindset, description of their job. A lot of times dispatchers aren't incentivized properly either, right? They should be incentivized to maximize the revenue, right? Not to run all the calls that are on the board. That's not their job. Their job is to maximize the revenue. Part of that too, Brigham mentioned that, dispatcher never, ever, ever should be the person who's allowed to cut off calls, decide when's enough and enough. If you leave that in the hands of the dispatcher, they will always shut that down earlier than you would want. That needs to be a manager. That needs to be the owner. That needs to be someone outside of someone doing dispatching, because no matter what, that dispatcher doesn't want to call people and push them to the next day. And in the middle of summer, I want to call, regularly and reschedule people because I cannot, I will not lose those opportunities if I do a good job. And I'll never get those opportunities if I don't say yes from the first part. I know Brigham, I once had him on a jam session, which was incredible, by the way. But he talked about what was it called? It's not wait list. It's a
urgency list.
Urgency list. Nobody likes
urgency list. Yeah. Brilliant stuff.
So I could talk about that for a minute, but let me just clarify. Zach, did you get your question answered?
Yeah, I was gonna
do a follow up.
Ask you a follow up, Brigham, but you can continue.
Go
Well, my follow up was gonna be, I think, what you're about to talk about, which is if a dispatcher's job is to maximize revenue, and that requires rescheduling some calls, potentially hurting some customers' feelings or making them angry with the company, how does a dispatcher manage that in the best way possible so as to maximize revenue without hurting the company's reputation?
Yeah. So we're aligned. We're on the same page there. I don't know how you do it without the pattern for excellence. Now, we've talked about the pattern for excellence on this program several times. But what does the pattern for excellence do? It gives you the ability, the soft skills that you need to reason with outside customers, the homeowner, and your inside customers, the technicians and the CSRs and everybody else in between that's at the office. But here's the thing, Josh is right. You want to maximize revenue. And I like how he rephrased it and said it's about bringing in the most amount of money possible each day into the organization, right? Is that a very simplistic way to say it?
Yes.
So, and yet we can never say no. And so how do you do that? Well, the fact of the matter is that people are going to work with someone. They don't call you for fun. They don't call you for their help. They don't call you just to find out what a price is. They're calling because they really need the services that you provide. So, and if you're busy, there's a good chance that others are going to be busy as well. So regardless, they'll be waiting. And if they're going to wait, then they might as well wait for you. So you've got to be better at everybody else in your social skills. Okay, your soft skills, your ability to reason with people, to listen to them, to show them that you care, to reassure them that they've called the right place, to ask the right questions, to find out what's missing, build value for your unique organization and your technicians, and just go above and beyond your ability to help them see that, you know what, I may be waiting a while, but this is the company that I want to work with. Now that's the dispatcher's job, is to sell them on the fact that they've called the right place, whether they're waiting or not. And so, yes, part of the example that we used in Tetris, I mean, look, sure, we want to keep our technicians busy, But I love how Josh added the fact that busy doing the best jobs, the most revenue generating jobs. However, that doesn't mean that all the other jobs are less important or secondary. We just got to put them on the urgency list. So the urgency list is really cool. We have scripts. Feel free to just call us at Power Selling Pros and we can get you the scripts to use it. But it goes something like this. Very simple. Customer gets on the phone, you listen, you care, you reassure, you ask the right questions. And then after that, once you find out what their expectation is, in other words, when they'd like you to come out, you propose the urgency list. Now, if you can meet their expectation, you don't need an urgency list, right? If they've got an expectation of you coming out this afternoon and you have a technician that can come out this afternoon, just book it. Don't worry about the urgency list. But if they want you to come out this afternoon and it's not looking good, you simply present the urgency list. Mr. Jones, I'm going to get you on today's urgency list. Now, the urgency list gives you faster service. As soon as a customer calls in to reschedule or a technician gets done early in your area, I'm going to move in that slot. But in order to get you on today's urgency list, I've got to get you into the schedule. Now I've got an opening on Tuesday between 2 and 4. Can I book that appointment in order to get you on today's urgency list? And we'll call you as soon as the technician is on his way. So again, it's about focusing in on what you can do as opposed to what you cannot do. And again, that's pattern for excellence. That is mastering, it's them mastering the pattern for excellence, social skills. It's not sales, it's customer service.
So a question on that. So maximizing revenue, clearly key, super important. When does it become appropriate that a dispatcher could see, okay, I'm keeping them busy, but they're not improving. Their average ticket is pretty low. They're not upselling. They're just going out and doing the basic job and they leave. We always speak to our contractors about if you are thorough enough, you'll almost always find something that can be fixed, or you can make a certain recommendation. So does the dispatchers have any responsibility in questioning the tech as to why his average ticket might be low or he's not making any upsells? Because you could fly through a job pretty quick if you're not being as thorough, and as a result you miss sale opportunities. So I'd love to kind of gauge your thought process around that. Can the dispatcher help in that regard?
I would say in that specific situation, no.
Okay.
Like a dispatcher is not in charge of training and you certainly want the dispatcher to be part of the process. If there's a closeout process still, which most companies don't have anymore because of the field management and CRM system we have, making sure they were thorough after the fact. But it shouldn't be up to a dispatcher to pick who are the A players and who's getting the best calls, because it leads to potential favoritism. It needs to come from the management team. It needs to be clearly defined on, hey, these are tier 1 guys, they get the biggest opportunities. Here's the tier 2 guys, which are, most of your techs, which get some opportunities, but only when it makes sense. And then here's the tier 3 guys, which we try to focus on maintenance because they're not fully trained on the sales cycle yet, right?
Is that a system that the owner or the sales manager has to map out? Because I've heard this.
Service manager, yes.
Okay.
It's the service manager, and they give that to the dispatcher, and they define who is who and why. It's really important there's a why too. Like I say this all the time, and it's kind of controversial, but I think I play favorites. I'm a fan of playing favorites, but you have to play favorites for a reason. It can't be because I like the guy. It can't be because he's nice. It can't be because we both like, the Bengals. That's not true. That's a terrible way to play a favorite. But I believe that if you treated everyone equal, that's actually unfair. I believe in fairness, not equality. There's technicians that work the weekends, work nights, never complain, create an amazing customer experience, have a great average ticket, turn over a ton of leads, and I have no problems with them. No callbacks, no issues. They're just a joy to work with, and everybody has those guys. And if I treated him the exact same way as I treated that guy that complains, that's an issue, that has callbacks, that gets negative reviews, and I treat literally the same way, that's awfully unfair. So you have to play favorites, but do not let that dispatcher decide who plays favorites, and don't not document it either. If you're going to play favorites, there needs to be to be a tier 1 technician, here's the requirements to get. You have to have this high average ticket, this high closing percentage, this many reviews. Spell it out so they earn the right and they know exactly what it takes to get all those opportunities.
So a CSR manager should probably speak with the CSRs and the
this is more
technicians.
Dispatching, right? But
sorry,
the
yeah,
dispatching,
the dispatchers, the manager in charge of the dispatchers should probably speak with the dispatchers themselves and the technicians to see if there's favoritism going on. Because what I've learned is this is happening across the industry, and techs are totally demoralized because they are consistently feel like they're not being chosen over their teammate, those other techs. So again, there's got to be some research I can imagine to figure out what's actually going on.
You should be favoring certain technicians, but for a clear defined reason. And I wouldn't put it in the call center managers bucket. It needs to be in their direct manager, their service manager, someone who's watching their numbers and driving. And there has to be clear parameters on what is a tier 1 tech, what is a tier 2 tech by the numbers. So when they have that conversation, like, oh, John's getting all the opportunities. They're like, yeah, he gets more opportunities than you because of this. If you want the same opportunities as John, I'd love to give them to you. All you have to do is this, and this. That's it. And I'll give you the exact same opportunities as John.
So it's based on performance.
100%.
So it's their performance, and that's fair.
Correct. Equal is often not fair. Like, fair means you play favorites for the people who earned it.
Yes, I agree.
So 2 clarifying questions here. I'm trying to anticipate what questions contractors are going to be thinking to themselves as they listen to this. Okay. So 2 that come to mind is, number 1, a lot of contractors schedule appointments directly onto the board for a certain day and time, and then later have to go and reschedule that. Others choose not to schedule anything at all definitively. They put all customers on a urgency list because they don't want to make that commitment and then disappoint the customer when they call to reschedule. Is one of those options better for maximizing revenue, or does it depend?
I have a pretty strong opinion of this. I go with the mindset and belief, and I think we've talked about this before, that I never know what a call is actually worth. I don't know if that's going to be a $79 tune-up or if it's going to be a $10,000 install. I never know. By the way, you don't know. No one knows until we go out and do the work and visit the house. So I make the assumption that every single call is a $10,000 install, and I cannot afford to lose a single call. And I know very well that if I do not give people time frames and I'm not working within that customer's normal constraints and trying to do that, even if I have to change them, right? If I don't do that up front, I have way less opportunity. I will lose calls. And if everyone's worth $10,000 to me, I can't afford to do that. So I am a big fan of actually putting them on the schedule and at least trying to capture that call so they're not calling someone else right away.
Got it. So you're mostly rescheduling based on drive time, number 1, not what you think the revenue is going to be right off the bat, unless you know.
How do you know the revenue? You don't know the revenue. The exception of how old the system is. If we have notes, we've been there multiple times. This changes the things. Drive time is the number 1 depending on your market. If you're in if you're in a small market and it's one side to the other in 30 minutes, drive time is not the biggest thing. If you're in California and you're in LA, drive time's a big problem. You know what I mean? Like, that could be 5 hours with traffic. It's like, yeah, no, drive times are number 1 factor. So that plays into it, right? But it's really what opportunity is there. Is this a house we know it has a 10-plus-year-old system? Is it broken down versus a tune-up? I got to favor breaking down over tune-ups, right? It's the right thing to do for the customer. Do they have young children, or are they elderly, right? Now it becomes a safety issue. I got to play favorites on that, right? Yeah. Is this a agreement customer versus a non-agreement customer? I have the obligation to play favorites on that. So the key to this is you can't just say a dispatcher like, hey, go maximize revenue. You have to define what maximizing revenue looks like for your market. Depending on your market, it can be drive time as the first qualifier. It can also be age of equipment. And then from there, are they agreement customer, or is it broken down? Yes or no? That's probably the next question. Are they agreement customer? And then all of those can be overridden by, hey, we have an infant in the house and it's the middle of summer or the middle of winter, or a really elderly couple. That's, if there's a safety issue, that's that.
Yeah. This requires a great deal of intuition as well. Then this is not just here's the process, follow the steps, but this requires
it's a fairly easy process. I've spelled out this exact process step by step. Like, this is the first question you ask, and then you're prioritizing the calls, right? We actually, when I worked for Pulse, which was that, huge, they were trying to Uberize the home service industry. Like, we actually created a auto calculation, like trying to figure out, using each one. So like it automatically popped which ones were the most important customers based off of the parameters we set up. So it's not as much intuition as you think. Like, if they don't say, hey, we have young children and our house is 90 degrees already, then that's not, then we're good. If they do, then I'm putting that as the first call, right? The one we have to run, because I have a moral obligation to do that.
Many people would argue that install opportunities should be favoritized, correct?
Yeah. The 10 plus is where your biggest revenue potential is.
Some
people do A plus, by the way, too.
Okay.
It just means it's an older system.
So a thought on that. Install boards have been organized and structured in different ways, and from what I've learned on the road, looking, like visiting different contractors with Josh, is there's more successful ways of doing so. So if any of you contractors out there need a more concise and effective way to structure your install board, we've just literally wrote content on it. So you're very welcome to reach out and we can send that over to you happily.
Nice. That's awesome.
So I have a question as we talk about maximizing revenue. From a leadership standpoint, how do we train and mentor the dispatcher to focus on revenue generation as a priority in their dispatching, but more importantly, keep their eye focused on something bigger than in just any one individual, right? Maximizing revenue, it may help the technician's income. The dispatcher may be even incentivized as they do that, which is great. And we know that especially millennials are motivated by things other than money. So how do we create a good cause around that and achieve our end goals as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a culture thing, right? Are you in the sales culture business? That helps with it, right? They need to have an incentive structure. I'm a big believer in having every team member incentivized on things they can affect. But really, you're telling the story of, I mean, why is a dispatcher's job to maximize revenue? Because those calls are the biggest opportunity calls. It's not, they're the same thing. Like if they have a 10 plus year old system, odds are they have a bigger problem than one who has a 3-year-old system. I mean, it's just the math, it's statistics, it's fact, right? If it's broken down, they have a bigger problem than someone whose AC is still working. It's not just because we're making more money, but that's a poor customer experience to put, somebody who has 2 systems, one's working perfectly fine, their house is still 78, but you like it at 74, compared to somebody's house who's 90 and they have 1 system and it's broken down. So it's the maximized revenue is what to focus on because it helps paint the picture, but it's the customer experience is the exact same. They're directly aligned. Does that make sense?
Total. And I would add to that with reminding the owners that are listening that a primary objective is to help the team realize that there is no better option for the homeowner than that organization.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They still have to sell it, and you sell over the phone with the CSRs. Certainly on the dispatcher when we have to reschedule.
Here's the reason why I bring it up. The reason why I bring it up is because we often hear dispatchers say to homeowners things like, "Well, there are other choices out there." We catch them, right? We catch them red-handed because all their calls are recorded, right? Oh well, we're not the cheapest.
Oh.
Or it's probably
out there. We can't do it. We're slammed.
Yeah, I'm just going to level with you. There's just it's probably going to be 3 or 4 days before we get out to you. And look, that's them looking out for the customer. Now,
No, that's not them looking out for the customer.
right, exactly. Because if the company is the right choice, then none of that should matter.
This is controversial, but I would argue that that's just lazy. It's
Yes.
in my opinion, it's a consequence of being lazy and having poor systems.
Yes.
Trying to protect yourself as a
Sure.
individual.
Sure. But again, you've got to be able to sell the employee so that you overcome all those issues, whether it's laziness, whether it's them not believing in the organization, because that's what it comes down to. That is a symptom of something much longer. It's a belief issue that you've got to fix as the owner. So just reminding the audience that, you know, it's really all on the owner. The owner's got to sell it. He's got to sell his organization as the best choice for the homeowner, period. Even if they have to wait, even if they have to pay more, they are the best choice. You've got to do that, and your team has to believe it in their guts.
Yeah, and
Now,
it never costs more. No, we deliver more value.
Mm-hmm.
you
Right.
know,
And
there's
again,
go on, Laura.
okay, real quick. It's funny. We're pausing for each other. We're so polite. Sugar. Oh yeah. So building perceived value. How can a dispatcher facilitate that over the phone?
So part of that is exactly what Brigham discovered. I think the urgency list is a brilliant concept and idea that I've since borrowed, because I'm not allowed to say steal. I borrowed and rolled it out other places. It's great. That's a way to overcome objections and help with upset people. I also think a dispatcher should have the ability to give some things away. So even if it's like movie tickets or whatever, like we should be able to make them feel warm and fuzzy when we have to reschedule someone. They should have the power to do that. But it's really more than anything else. It's a personality thing. Understand that it's frustrating when someone gets rescheduled. It's part of the process. It needs to be done. If you're not doing it, you're missing a lot of money. But it's going to upset customers, and you better have the right person dispatching, which goes back to personality too. Like, I think a lot of contractors don't really understand the correct personality for a dispatcher. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the team needs to have the soft skills to reassure the customer, empathize with them, show them that they're listening. I keep going back to the pattern for excellence because the dispatcher absolutely needs it in order to do their job effectively. They need it.
Yeah, and you know, for people who haven't listened to that, you should go back and listen to it. Brigham breaks it down in great detail. But essentially, it's the soft skills, right? The creating personality to, you know, sympathizing to going through that whole process. We don't need to necessarily deep dive into that, but I think it's important. It's the first time you've heard Pattern for Excellence, you understand what he's talking about.
Yeah. The cool thing about it is that as they get more effective at these soft skills at work, 8 to 10 hours a day, imagine how they're going to be able to do the same at home. And that's one of the things you got to help them buy in on, is that as they practice these skills at work, they're going to become more effective in their ability to reason with their kids, reason with their spouse, reason with their neighbors in their community, and all their other social relationships. And when your job becomes a place where kind of a practice ground where you can learn to be better at working with people, dealing with people, it's a completely different game if you can do that as an owner. So
yeah, goes back to the 3 promises, right?
Promises. There we go.
Yeah.
You read my mind. If you sell, if you really can buy into the 3 promises and make it part of your onboarding process and make it part of your culture, the level of engagement of your whole team will increase, but also you are then making them aware in the promise of being a better person. Again, they can see immediately why these soft skills will have a direct relationship direct relation as to how they show up at home. So if you haven't heard anything about the three promises, it's in our first episode, I believe, right? Where we took on the three promises. It's amazing. It's an amazing concept for retention and achieving instantaneous engagement. So go back and listen to that.
Yeah, what a great mindset to have with those three promises. When the owner reiterates and repeats those three promises with every employee that they bring on, they remind themselves what they're all about. And it also helps us with the money issue, that yes, money is a byproduct of them becoming a better person, of them becoming better at what they do, and them being paid exceptionally well.
Yep. I know we're going a little bit off track here for dispatchers specifically, which is totally fine. But I think it is important to talk about and tackle the personality of a dispatcher, because I think so many contractors think the exact opposite, especially smaller contractors. And it's that cow path theory, right? They're doing it because that's the way the company did before, or when I started in the industry, that's the type of person that was a dispatcher. And I think, like, I'll start tackling this, but Brigham and Zach, I know you guys deal with a lot of dispatchers. I want you to jump in, but a lot of companies feel, because that's the way it's historically been, that dispatcher should be a super tough, that smoker voice and push the text around, doesn't take crap from the text, right? Can work okay with the phone, but it's more important that they are tough with text. And I would make the very clear, very proven argument that your dispatcher needs to be one of the sweetest people in your office. You will never get a technician. You will never force a technician to work those extra calls effectively. You could literally force them, but they won't stay. Your retention will be worse, and they won't do a great job of it. You need those technicians to want to do those things, to do it as a favor, their appreciation back and forth. So I think a dispatcher needs to be one of your sweetest people on the team. Once again, Brigham said before, it can't be walked all over, but that's not what we're talking about. Being kind and being a floor mat are not the same thing.
And that's something that I think, and I highly doubt that this is a part of the recruitment process in most contracting companies. And again, you guys can clarify this for me. Personality profiling, I feel, could be very powerful in ensuring that they're kind, sweet. But what it also allows you to see is, are they conscientious? If they are conscientious, they're less inclined to be like, no, sorry, our board's full, or no, sorry, we don't have time, or no, sorry, we can't come out to you today. So I guess I would challenge contractors out there to consider personality profiling. Look it up, Google it, see is it something that could be incorporated into your recruitment process, because what you can learn about somebody prior to hiring with personality profiling is phenomenal and super fascinating and really easy to roll out.
Yeah. Josh said it right. They've got to be kind, and they've got to have a really good relationship with those technicians. And the reason why that is because technicians are emotional. Mm-hmm. And here's what I mean by that, is that they're emotionally driven. If they like the person that they're working for in a way, they're going to want to do extra things, go the extra mile. And you're going to get more performance, more production out of them if you can take care of those technicians' emotional needs.
Agreed.
I know we're running short of time, but I do have one more topic, and I'm super curious what you guys think of this. And I have the answer of what I think, and I'll do it afterwards in this situation. But this is somewhat controversial, but technicians, when you're dispatching them, do you give them all their calls for the day? You give them one at a time? You say it out loud because it's podcast. Yeah. Everybody's trying to set a figure out. That doesn't work. Yeah.
So you give them one at a time. That's their only call until the next one, in my opinion. Now, feel free to chime in, Josh.
I agree 100%. I think when you load them up for the day, when they go to that one call that's not as good a call, it's a maintenance call, and they see their next call is something that's broken down, they tend to spend less time and effort on that maintenance call, and they walk over money. They leave early. They're not as thorough. They don't spend as much time because they know the next call, there's a good opportunity, right? So I think releasing their calls for the entire day is a terrible mistake that a lot of companies do.
It's lazy.
Well, it's not lazy. I found that most of the time that's the case. It's because the owner or the manager was once a service tech. And from a service tech's perspective, it's nice to know what you're doing for the entire day. But that's not the ideal way to set up if you're really focused on growth and customer service and sales.
Curious, last question. Dispatchers communicate with techs in various different ways in various different companies. What do you think, or what do you all think is the best way to communicate with your techs? The best way the dispatchers should communicate with your techs?
Are you talking from a communication style?
No, not style. Like
I
tool.
think she means more platform.
Yeah, platform tool.
Oh, got it. That's
What are
good
your thoughts?
I don't know.
How does Parker?
So we use Service Titan. So our dispatchers talk less to the techs than they ever have. Obviously, we used to do it by phone, but now we run more off of texting. To me, it doesn't matter that much how you're communicating with them as long as you're doing it consistently. I've seen companies where the dispatcher does some text by some technicians by text because that's the way to do it. Some by phone call, some over Voxer, some they FaceTime, and it's like that's not a sustainable good system. I think the best way of doing it is still by phone call and by video chat. So like a FaceTime is perfect, but that's less realistic in the middle of summertime, and I'm aware of that. So text is fine with me. By the way, if you're going to text, don't just text from a personal phone. Use a system so you could track everything that's said, because it helps you to go back and understand and things don't get forgotten. So make sure you're using a service for that.
Interesting. I love it. I've seen all sorts, and I'm always curious on what is the best way. So thank you. We are coming to the end, guys. Zach, I'm going to pass the mic over to you. I'd like you to summarize real quick the main points. I think this has been awesome. Thank you guys for embarking your knowledge upon us. I hope we ask good questions to pull all you know out of you. So Zach, summarize up real quick so we can really allow these contractors to know what they should have picked up on today. And if they've missed anything, they have the opportunity to go back and re-listen.
With pleasure. So
polite.
By the way, if you're watching on video, just Brigham just stood up and is doing like a power pose going on right now. I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah, his arms crossed, standing up. All right, so we're talking about dispatching today, and the goal of a dispatcher, most companies think it's to fill the board, to get as many appointments on the board as possible. In reality, the job of a dispatcher should be to maximize revenue. Now, that might mean sometimes you have to reschedule a customer's appointment. It might mean you have to hurt a customer's feelings. But that's why it's extremely important for you to teach your dispatcher skills like the urgency list, like how to prioritize calls based on how far away they are. What's the drive time going to be? What conditions is the call happening within? Is there an infant in the home? Is there an elderly person? What are we looking at from a health standpoint too? You should have a process for your dispatchers to be able to evaluate appointments on all these things. And I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. The fairness, not equality point. We want to make sure that we are giving jobs to the best performing technicians, that we do have favorites based on who's performing at the highest level, who's going to serve the company the best. And it's smart for companies to have a plan in place to help technicians grow from that tier 2 to a tier 1 technician so that they can get the opportunities the dispatcher is sending their way as well. Because you cannot afford to lose a single call. So you've got to book every single call, and you've got to have the best guy possible on every single call. And that is a brief rundown of what we discussed today about dispatching.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zach, for summarizing that. Thank you, guys, for...
As I was going through that, I'm realizing there's we talked about a lot of stuff.
Yes, we did. Hopefully everybody found that helpful, and until next time, stay busy. Email us with any questions. We're always here to help you. It's not just something you can chime in on and listen to every week. We're here to truly support your growth. So reach out to us, either go to either of our websites. We're giving away free things all the time to help your growth. But again, if it doesn't meet exactly what you need, always reach out. We're more than happy to help. So guys, until next time, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Lip Service for Contractors. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to leave us a review in the App Store and don't forget to share with your friends. Ideas are cheap. Implementation is what separates the winners from the watchers. Go out and implement these ideas. See you on the next episode of Lip Service for Contractors.